before they sold out arenas on every continent, before they tore themselves apart in one of rock's most spectacular implosions, Guns N' Roses were 5 broke strangers sleeping on a filthy couch in Hollywood, dreaming of something the world had never heard before. And when that something finally arrived, it hit like a detonation. In 1985, on the neon-soaked sidewalks of the Sunset Strip, Los Angeles was the center of the hard rock universe. The clubs were packed, the hairspray was thick, the competition was ferocious. Hundreds of bands were clawing for attention, for a deal, for survival. Most of them sounded exactly alike, polished, pretty, and safe. What was about to crawl out of that scene was anything but safe. 5 volatile personalities collided and merged to form something genuinely dangerous. Axl Rose, born William Bruce Bailey in Lafayette, Indiana, had arrived in Los Angeles with a burning rage inside him and a voice that could strip paint off walls or break your heart depending on the moment. Slash, born Saul Hudson in London, raised in Los Angeles, had a guitar style rooted in the blues, but turned up to a voltage the blues never intended. Duff McKagan arrived from Seattle, a punk kid who could play bass like a freight train. Izzy Stradlin brought the loose, rolling rhythm and the classic rock instincts. And Steven Adler sat behind the drums and hit them like a man trying to start a fire with his bare hands. Together, they were combustible, literally. They lived in their rehearsal space. They ate what they could find. They played every club on the strip that would have them. Axl would not show up for rehearsals for days, then arrive and deliver something transcendent. Slash would practice until his fingers bled. The tension between them was not a bug in the system. It was the system. That grinding, crackling, barely contained chaos was the fuel that powered everything. Word spread fast through the clubs of Hollywood that something real was happening with these 5. Not manufactured, not packaged, real, raw, frightening in the best possible way. The Troubadour, the Whiskey, a Go-Go, the Roxy. Anywhere they played, they left the audience slightly shaken. They were signing autographs before they had a record deal because people already knew this was something you needed to be part of. Geffen Records signed them in 1986, and the band went into the studio with producer Mike Klink. What they recorded over the next several months would become one of the most important debut albums in the history of rock and roll. But no one at the label quite knew what they had yet. The band was already a chaos machine. Members disappeared. Fights erupted. The future was never guaranteed for even a single day. Appetite for destruction exploded onto the world in July of 1987, and it changed everything. This was not polished glam metal. This was not radio-friendly pop rock with a hard edge bolted on. This was genuinely dangerous music, blues-drenched, punk raw, ferociously melodic, dripping with streetwise attitude and heartbroken longing in equal measure. Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine, Mr. Brownstone, Night Train. One after another, the songs were undeniable. The guitar work of Slash was some of the most thrilling and soulful playing to emerge from the rock world in a decade. And Axl Rose's voice, that impossible instrument capable of a whisper and a scream in the same breath, made every song an event. The album initially sold modestly, then it exploded. It climbed to number 1. It sold 18 million copies in the United States alone. It remains the best-selling debut album in American rock history. Nothing about it has aged. Nothing about it has become quaint. It sounds as dangerous today as it did in 1987. They became the most exciting and volatile band on the planet. Supporting Aerosmith and Mötley Crüe, then headlining their own tours, Guns N' Roses on stage was an event that could go gloriously right or catastrophically wrong at any moment, and that uncertainty was part of the electricity. Axl would take the stage 90 minutes late and then deliver a performance that made you forgive everything. Slash would step to the front of the stage and play a solo that seemed to speak directly to some deep and honest place in your chest. They were not a band you watched. They were a band you survived. But behind the spectacle, the darkness was real, and it was deepening. Addiction was consuming the band from the inside. Steven Adler's drug use became so severe that he could no longer perform reliably, and in 1990, he was replaced by Matt Sorum. The tensions between Axl and virtually every other member were constant and corrosive. Izzy Stradlin, the quiet architect of so much of the band's musical DNA, walked away in 1991. The machine was straining against itself, but it had one final, enormous act to deliver. Use Your Illusion arrived in September of 1991. Not one album, but two, released simultaneously. A double statement of ambition, excess, range, and genius. November Rain, Estranged, Civil War, Don't Cry, You Could Be Mine, Patience. The catalog that emerged from these two records showed a band reaching far beyond the hard rock confines of their debut. Orchestras, ballads, political fury, widescreen cinematic drama. Not everything landed. Not every moment justified its length. But the ambition was staggering. And when it worked on a scale very few rock bands have ever achieved. The Illusion Tour became one of the most legendary and troubled concert campaigns in rock history. Over 194 shows across 2 years, spanning the globe, the band brought millions of fans to their feet and generated headlines almost everywhere they went, for the wrong reasons as often as the right ones. Riots, walk-offs, late starts, chaos, but also, when everything aligned, transcendent rock and roll. Slash's guitar burning through the night, Axl commanding a stadium of 100,000 people with a movement of his hand. These were not ordinary concerts. They were events in history. The original lineup shattered in the years that followed. By 1996, Slash was gone. Duff would follow. The band that had conquered the world had consumed itself. What remained was the name, the legacy, and one man's increasingly isolated vision of what Guns N' Roses could become. For nearly 2 decades, Axl Rose labored in the studio on an album the world was told would redefine rock music. Chinese Democracy, finally released in 2008 after 15 years and an estimated cost of $13 million, arrived to a mixture of genuine admiration and exhausted bewilderment. The album had moments of real brilliance, but it could not be what it needed to be. A continuation of something that had been built by 5 people together, not one person alone. When Axl and Slash finally ended their 2-decade estrangement and announced the Not in This Lifetime reunion tour in 2016, the rock world held its collective breath. What followed was one of the highest grossing concert tours in history. Over $500 million in revenue. Stadiums sold out on every continent. Fans who had given up hope standing in the rain with tears on their faces. The music had not diminished. The power was still there. Slash's Les Paul still sang. Axl's voice, transformed by time but no less commanding, still ruled whatever room he entered. It was not a nostalgia exercise. It was a reckoning. No other band channeled the hunger, the danger, and the heartbreak of the American dream, gone sideways quite the way Guns N' Roses did. They arrived at a precise moment when rock music needed a transfusion of genuine blood, when glam had grown too comfortable and the edges had been sanded off, and they provided it without apology. They influenced a generation of bands who followed them in the 90s and beyond, not by creating a sound that could be easily copied, but by reminding every musician who heard them that authenticity cannot be manufactured and real danger cannot be faked. The shadow they cast falls across every hard rock band that has come since. Their debut album sits on a throne by itself. Their chaos became part of rock mythology, proof that greatness and self-destruction are sometimes the same force, pointed in different directions. Guns N' Roses never gave you safety. They never gave you comfort. They gave you something far more valuable, the feeling that rock and roll was still capable of meaning something, still capable of sounding like life lived at full velocity, with the windows down and the consequences ignored. From a filthy rehearsal space on the Sunset Strip to the largest stages on Earth, from one of the greatest debut albums ever recorded to a reunion that proved the music was bigger than the men, the story of Guns N' Roses is, at its core, the story of what rock and roll is. Not perfect, not safe, not polished, but real. And still, after all of it, absolutely, undeniably alive.